the mic on? Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Night of the Ideas here at Imperial College. My name is Rob McCargo. I'm PwC's AI Programme Leader. We've got a remarkable evening in store for you. I'm delighted to see enormously great turnout tonight. We've got some superstar speakers and we've seen some phenomenal technology. My particular favourite was the drones and the seeing robots, extraordinary stuff. So the way it will work today, we have an extraordinary panel coming up shortly. What I would like to do is welcome you to CreAItivity. This is where Night of the Ideas moves into the realm of artificial intelligence and creativity. It's an amazing technology. It's going to lead to transformational benefits across the world. And I'm so excited to present this event to you tonight. But first of all, I'd like to welcome Professor Nick Jennings to the stage. We've got an amazing facility to present this from today. And I'd just like to introduce Nick to say a few words to welcome us here to the evening's festivities. Nick, please join us at the stage.
Thank you. Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Je vous souhaite très chaleureusement à tous la bienvenue à Imperial College. Je suis Nick Jennings, Vice-Provost for Research and Enterprise, et chercheur et professeur en intelligence artificielle. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous accueillir ce soir pour cet événement. I shall now return to English, which I may be a bit better at. I apologize to all the French in the audience for my efforts at French. Imperial College London is delighted to be part of the Night of Ideas, hosted in partnership with the cultural and scientific departments of the Embassy of France in the UK, the French Institute, and the French Tech London. We strongly endorse the efforts of the Embassy and Mr. Jean-Pierre Jouet, France's ambassador to the UK, to promote long-lasting cooperation between France and the UK in higher education, research and innovation. Thank you to Jean Arlat as the Science and Technology Councillor for instigating this valuable night and for opening the event with me. The Night of Ideas follows the successful state visit of the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, last week. We know that the President and Prime Minister of the UK, as well as focusing on trade, defence, security, development and migration policy, for the first time expanded the summit to cover the full spectrum of the UK-France bilateral relationship, including prosperity, innovation, science and education, things that are very important to us here at Imperial. Of particular relevance to tonight's theme, there was a commitment to developing collaboration in the next generation of technologies and growing the businesses of the future. We warmly welcome these developments. Imperial is very proud of its strong ties with France, and we intend to deepen and broaden them going forward, whatever the outcome of the Brexit negotiations. Researchers in France have collaborated with Imperial to publish more than 8,000 papers in the last decade. We have nearly 700 French students here, and it's the college's second largest international group. We have over 200 French staff, and we have a thriving community of 3,500 alumni living in France. Just last week, the new joint Imperial CNRS Maths Laboratory, Abraham de Moivre, was initiated and signed by the ambassador and our president, Alice Gass. And this offers a fantastic platform to bring together Imperial, a fantastic university with great strength in science, technology, engineering and maths, to work with CNRS mathematicians, to work on common projects such as artificial intelligence, the theme of our debate tonight. Artificial intelligence here at Imperial has a long history and has a great number of researchers dotted around all the faculties. We have just initiated an Imperial College network of excellence in artificial intelligence and machine learning for exactly this purpose, to bring together researchers and faculty from around the college. And this covers all 4 faculties. So we have AI researchers in engineering, in natural sciences, in medicine, and in the business school. And we really want to bring them together. This is a very exciting time to be an AI researcher, and AI is a really exciting topic to be involved with at the moment. So I'm delighted to welcome you to Imperial and to what I hope will be a fascinating evening and debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And I should also add that we are living stream across the globe from Dakar to Brussels to Los Angeles and Buenos Aires. So welcome to the live stream viewers here tonight. It also now gives me fantastically great pleasure to welcome Jean Arlat, the Science Councillor to the French Ambassador to the United Kingdom. Without the support of Jean and his team, this couldn't have happened. Jean, please join us on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shimon, and thank you, Professor Jennings, for hosting us here. This is an honor to be here. Friends of the art and sciences, free thinkers and creative spirits, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give you one word about a long time ago a French writer mentioned. In the long term, the light shed by science becomes every nation's shared heritage. This was mentioned in the 18th century by the French writer Gabriel Sénac de Meilhan, who spent quite a long time in London, actually. So the connection was established some years ago already. He was pointing out the importance of science and spreading knowledge at the time of the French Revolution, as I mentioned. Today, science is shedding its light through the universities and research centers, and being here is quite important. And especially tonight, light is important, especially for the nights of ideas. The sharing of talent is well illustrated by Imperial College in London. Actually, it's an honor to be in one of the best universities in UK and the most open internationally university in the UK. And you mentioned the number of French students and French faculties are hosted by university. You mentioned also that last week there was an agreement for a laboratory in mathematics around the Moivre that was opened and launched between the National Center for Scientific Research in France and Imperial College. This is a strong commitment about continuing cooperation between France and UK, and it's a starting point, because what we like to do as well is the fact that this kind of agreement, which is a strong connection, is something that we have to promote, and it's something that the embassy, and especially the scientific department, is fostering, not only in London, but beyond the borders of London to other places in UK. And I would like to mention a few words connecting the tonight's topic. Artificial intelligence is something that you mentioned already, was incremental, and last week was an important event by launching the network on artificial intelligence. And I was told that you mentioned a lot of professors that were involved into this topic. I mentioned there are more than 50 professors involved into this domain, which is a very great figure. And this normal and obvious that to address this topic, we are coming to Imperial. And I would like then to mention again the French Revolution. There is another revolution that is worldwide concerning technologies. Technologies, digital technologies in particular, and technologies that are developing in this domain are instrumental for the topic of artificial intelligence, and also for the fact that the people can create differently new designs, new arts, and this is the topic of tonight. CreAItivity is something that we'll hear tonight by very selective speakers, very brilliant minds, and I'd like to mention that they are real smart people. whose intelligence is not at all artificial. Please enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean, and thanks for having us, Nick. Now, we've got a real treat in store. First of all, we have an absolute superstar of a chair. Anne O'Day is CEO and co-founder of Silicon Republic, which is Europe's leading technology and innovation news service, reporting online since 2001. Anne's a driving force behind Silicon Republic's Women Invent campaign, launched on International Women's Day in 2013, to champion remarkable women role models in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and to help tackle the gender gap in the knowledge industries. She's a founder of Inspirefest, a unique new international sci-tech event, and also sits on the advisory board of the Digital Youth Council and the Royal Irish Academy's Physical, Chemical, and Mathematical Sciences Committee. She's a regular speaker, a moderator at tech and STEM events, and it's my incredible pleasure to welcome Anne O'Day to the stage. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Rob, and thanks a million for everybody who started the evening. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Je suis enchantée d'être ici ce soir. C'est bien que je vienne de l'Irlande parce que ça ajoute, j'espère, un petit goût européen qui dépasse juste le Royaume-Uni et la France. I'm also now going to change to English because it's about 10 years since I spoke a word of French, but I said I'd make a small effort. So, as Rob was saying, we really have a remarkable panel for you now. Just a little bit of background on myself. As Rob was saying, I'm co-founder of Silicon Republic, and one of the areas, we've been writing about technology and science for 20 years, and one of the areas that just keeps coming up in the last 5 years is artificial intelligence. It is absolutely a fundamental part now of everything from medicine to the arts and creativity. And that's why I think tonight is really particularly interesting to explore that idea. We tend to think of artificial intelligence in terms of algorithms and precision and, I suppose, parsing data. But it's really fascinating, I think, to look at it from that point of view of the humanities, the arts, creativity. And to that end, the panel here is absolutely remarkable. Just to give you a very quick idea of how this is going to work, we have 3 wonderful panelists. I'll introduce them all separately, so I'm going to start off with the first, because each of them will come up here first and spend 10 minutes giving you some background on the remarkable work they're doing. And when they've each done their pieces, I'm going to invite them all back up here again, and then we hopefully will have a lively discussion and debate. And we want you guys to join in as well, so please don't be shy and do have your questions ready and do challenge these brilliant minds that we have here tonight. So without further ado, I want to invite to the stage for his first presentation, Dr. Aldo Faisal, who is Director of Brain and Behavioural Analytics Lab here at the Imperial College London and part of the Data Science Institute. So will you please give a big welcome to Aldo, please.
Bonsoir, bonsoir tout le monde. Je suis désolé, je ne parle pas français, and that is why I'm going also to continue in English. But of course, we should remember that creativity is beyond language, and creativity in any language becomes apparent by its own quality. And so I'm the first of the set of speakers. So my talk is going to be slightly different. I'm going to briefly only touch on my work and give you a bit on an outlook of where this new AI revolution is really coming from. And I'm happy to answer questions on that. So in my research, I work on the link between neuroscience and artificial intelligence. And before we go down between this deep link between what is the difference between biological intelligence that are clearly creative and artificial intelligence that may or may not be creative, let's just have a look at what it means for now to talk about artificial intelligence. And what I really believe is that there's a whole artificial intelligence iceberg. Most of the artificial intelligence that is already impacting our lives is actually invisible below. So when you're browsing your movie websites, the recommendation for the movies that you're getting, when early diagnostics is provided in healthcare, when security is provided by analyzing communication of people, when drone strikes are computed where they should hit, when your portfolio is optimized, or when your mobile phone remembers where you have parked your car. These are under the iceberg artificial intelligence that we almost barely notice that are just already happening at a massive scale. But I think what makes artificial intelligence striking now is really that we can, for the first time as end users, interact with these artificial intelligences in a very plastic way. So all your personal voice assistants, your Alexas, your Siris, Cortanas, or Hey Googles, all of these allow you to talk to an artificial system at a level that is experienceable without having to go into a university lab. And of course, we're seeing these efforts about self-driving cars, which are manifestations, embodiments of artificial intelligence in the public mind. And if you have ever sat in one, it's really a very powerful feeling. So my own work, we focus on artificial intelligence for healthcare, specifically for people with neurological disorders. And here we realized that AI can help us bridge some broken links that you may have in your nervous system to help you restore functions. And an early realization is here that artificial intelligence is not just about autonomous agents that go about and do things. It's about systems that understand what humans want and enable us to augment humans. So in this simple video that we shot a few years ago, we have a paralyzed person sitting in a wheelchair, and he's driving this wheelchair actively, and he's driving it by simply imagining where he wants to go. And this imagery of where he wants to go triggers eye movements that are classic or reflective of his motion intentions. And an AI analyzes how he's looking at the world and translates that into navigation commands. So this is a very simple application, and this is basically my claim to AI creativity, is that now we can take that further. We can analyze more data and look at how people look at paintings when they're painting. And if we have just enough data about how people are painting paintings, what arm movements they make, we can train machine learning systems to decode our natural intentions. So this may sound like a bit like magic, but actually, if you think about it, when you're at a cocktail party and you interact with people, based upon how they're looking with you in the environment, you can guess their social intentions. So this is about taking it to a much simpler level. Sorry, this is boring. And have basically somebody literally being able to paint by eye, by imagining what strokes she would like to do, too much of me, and then translating that into robotic movements. So all of this is progress that is enabled by the massive availability and the new facility of collecting data. And really, what really powers the AI revolution that we're seeing, these self-driving car technologies, the translation technologies, the abilities of systems to understand you, is what we call deep learning technologies. And I apologize if I sound like a professor who teaches machine learning, because that's what I am. But to give you a bit of a feeling what this is all really about and how abstract it becomes. So basically, these deep learning systems are systems that at one end are presented, for example, with an image. And then you have these little elements, these neurons, biological-like elements, that are looking at these images. And each neuron needs to make a decision, yes, I like this, or yes, I don't like what I see. And at each successive layer, you have neurons that look at previous neurons, and they need to decide, do I like what I see, do I not like what you see? And so as you're going through these deep and deeper structures, hence the word deep learning, you find that some neurons basically have come to define what they want to care about in the world they see. And so neurons in the very early layers see things like edges. If you go into deeper layers, you find neurons that are sensitive to parts of a car or wheels. And if you go into even deeper layers, you see neurons that are responsive to entire cars. So these networks have never heard about the concept of a car or the concept of a wheel or the concept of edge. They've just been fed with millions and millions of images of all sorts of kinds, and they're trying to make sense of them. And this formation of what makes sense to them is what drives the structure and this power of these deep learning networks. Now, very interestingly, now I'm putting my neuroscience hat on, if you look at what these neurons are responsive in different levels, you find that the human brain mimics this in a very convincing way, or the artificial intelligence, I should say, mimics the human brain. If you look at neurons that are in the lateral geniculate or in the primary visual cortex, you will find neurons that seem to be real neurons, that seem to be sensitive to the very much same stimuli that these artificial neural networks are sensitive to. And it's just a striking coincidence that's imposed by this architecture of layers and layers of neurons being connected together. Now, I don't want to tell you too much more about that, but I want to show you some very interesting examples that strike upon the ideas of what we perceive as creativity. So we're all familiar that I think in the visual arts, a painter is very much a sensory process. We are seeing a manifestation of how a painter wants to see the world. And the question comes about, can we extract something about the style in which a painter manifests the world by analyzing this with these deep neural networks? So let's take a photograph here of Big Ben, and we can take a picture here painted by Monet on a very different scene, obviously, in Venice. And we can then process this with the same neural networks. And we can ask these neural networks, try to understand how you can come up with this picture. What we then get is basically a perception pipeline that perceives the world according to Monet. And what we can then do is we can then feed this neural network the picture of Big Ben, and we get a picture drawn in the interpretation of Monet. We can do that with different styles. We can go for a Van Gogh, again, a very different painting, and then have it translated like that. Now, this system does not understand anything about painting or the motives it's showing. It shows that there are various elements in the visual world that depend about how we're combining these elementary operations of seeing colors and edges to transform them. And we can keep going. We can go into the abstract art. We can go for a Picasso and try to capture these structures in these images and ask this network to see the world in such a way. And then we can feed this network with a photograph and see its interpretation. Now, I want to be very, very clear. This doesn't take any of the creativity away of inventing, say, different styles, yeah? Or of inventing cubism. But it shows that there are perceptual elements that we find appealing that can be matched or reproduced by artificial systems. And so we are finding these very interesting links in the visual perception pathway. Now, something else we can do, and this is slightly psychedelic, so I hope you had a good glass of wine to enjoy that, is we can look at these neurons at different levels and basically take the image that these neurons are seeing in the middle levels and feed that back at the initial level. So basically, the network sees and then looks at what it's seeing at an intermediate level, and we feed it back. And this resulted in a very convincing demonstration, not made by us, but by a team at Google Brain, that is called Deep Dreams. And basically, we're continuously taking the images that the neurons in the middle layers are seeing and feeding them back at the input. And so basically, you see here something that you could think about, free association and just exploration, but effectively, we're just seeing the representations driving themselves. And I can play this movie for 10 hours. It's mesmerizing. And you're seeing basically all the concepts that are embodied in the brain of this artificial system being pulled out because they're patterns that remind the system of other patterns, and basically it's a free association system. And we can keep going with that. And really, this is where I would like to end, and I'm very much looking forward to my debate with all of you and my colleagues.
That's still going. Thanks so much, Dr. Aldo, Faisal. Thanks a million. For our next speaker, we're moving into the realm of music and artificial intelligence. So I'd like to introduce you to François Pachet, who's director of Spotify Creator Technology Research Lab. Welcome, François.
I need the HDMI plug. I'm not sure where it is. One of them is here. You know? yes, sorry. Sorry, yes, that's right. All right. Maybe, yes. All right, so, sorry. Yeah, I will talk a little bit about AI and music. I mean, AI is very hard to define what is AI and music as well. So if you put them together, it's really very, very messy. But I don't have any theory or well-defined position concerning creativity there, but I have, I think, a lot of experience because in my lab, when I was at Sony, we developed a lot of technologies for building tools for music creation. And I am a researcher, like my two colleagues, but I'm a bit maybe older. I was completely fed up with demos, you know, because when you're a researcher, you have a result, you publish a paper, you do a demo. And I thought, I want to go a bit beyond, you know. What if I try to take my results and I try to make real music with real musicians that's really distributed and that goes to the real audience? And so I've spent with my team, and in particular with an artist called Skiger. In fact, it's a French guy called Benoît Carré, who is a musician, composer, about 1.5 years trying to make an album, a music album, which was launched a few weeks ago, which is the first album of mainstream music composed with AI, that is by artists with AI. I want to just say a few words about that and maybe hopefully trigger discussions, debates, and fights and whatever. You know. Good. First thing I want to say, that AI is everywhere, but AI is incredible. It works very well when you have what is called a well-defined problem, you know, like regression, prediction, classification, and so forth. And there are many domains in which this is the case. For which this is like autonomous cars. I mean, it's well-defined. You know, you have a cost function. You have to minimize the number of people you kill, for instance, or the laws that you transgress or whatever. Face recognition is well-defined. It's the right one or it's not the right one. Tumors, detecting stuff in the brain, playing chess, all this is well-defined. And for, I would say, almost all these cases, AI is doing incredibly well, very often better than humans. But then what happened a few years ago that people started to use AI and machine learning and deep learning and other techniques in domains concerning, artistic domains, in which, of course, I mean, what is an artistic domain? It's a domain where nothing is well-defined, because no one knows what is a good song, no one knows what is a nice painting, no one knows what is a good story, compelling story, a nice movie, and so forth, a good recipe. But still, many people started to be interested in how we could twist all these incredible technologies to create stuff, to generate objects, or to help people creating interesting stuff. And there were a lot of results. I mean, mostly in 2016, you know, first trailer generated by AI for a horror movie, a script generated by AI, which was then shot with humans, painting, Rembrandt, you have heard about all that, and cooking and images and videos and stuff. And also music, of course, obviously. So I just want to say how it works is actually pretty simple. The idea is always the same. You start by a set of examples of music or paintings or whatever, and you feed them to some algorithm that's going to try to generalize, you know, look at what is in common with all these examples. And these methods are really becoming very powerful. They can find regularities or patterns that even humans would not find. It's particularly clear when you look at how AI plays chess, for instance, currently, or Go. And so you go up, when you abstract from the examples, you build a model that's basically a probabilistic model with probabilities that tell you, you know, this note has this probability of being followed or being not very far from this other note, this other chord, and stuff like that. And then once you have a model, you can do what is called sampling, that is drawing at random according to those probabilities. And by definition, you end up with creating something that's new, but that has these precisely by construction, these properties that you have extracted from the original set. And so it's pretty easy. So technically, this thing can be done nowadays in a few lines of Python. But the technical difficulty is really to do this under user constraint. But I will not talk about the technical challenges here. I just won't talk about the results, actually. And so the models that are upstairs are of many kinds. Markov models, max entropy for statistical physics, neural networks, deep, and so forth. So actually, currently, I would say no one really knows which models are the best. I mean, there are models which are better in terms of how much probabilistic information they can capture. Obviously, deep networks are very, very good. But no one knows if these models are better for creative tasks. Basically, that's a very interesting subject, but which we have been looking at. The Markov models are less powerful than deep networks, but in the end, maybe they generate more interesting stuff, because precisely interesting does not mean always imitative. So sometimes something creative is imitative, but there is also some kind of novelty. And so these questions are really only starting to be addressed now. I mean, I don't have any definitive answer on that. And so I can show you just 2 examples about what you feed. So in our team in music, you have basically 2 kinds of objects. You have scores, which are basically symbolic stuff. It's a bit like text, a bit more complicated, but it's symbolic. And you have also audio, which is, let's say, not symbolic. But, so if you feed with symbolic stuff, this is what we did 1 year ago, 1.5 years. We are big fans of the Beatles, like millions of people. So we fed some Beatles tune, and we created a new Beatles song called Daddy's Car. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to. You should listen to it very, very loud. Louder, the better, right? Okay. Enough. Now I speak. But that was, I would say, and Simon would, I already, anticipate his remark. It's not creative. It's a pastiche. All right. Okay. It was a demo. It's a very nice song, I think. But that was a symbolic thing. We created a score, and then we orchestrated the score with a normal process of orchestration and stuff. For audio, I want to give an example. So we took another song by I want to show what you can do with audio, which is very much what Aldo has just shown with images, with what he called a style transfer, where you take the style of something. He showed an image. You take a style of an image like Picasso, and you transfer the style. So you can do that kind of stuff with audio and music. I just give an example. So we take this song. You know this song? It's a French song. All right. No, but now there are people actually now who don't know the Beatles anymore. And it's really very depressing for me. I don't know what to talk about, basically. So, okay, we take the score of Michel, not the audio you just heard. This is a recording. Take the score where you have notes like D, G, whatever, and chord names, F minor, C major, whatever, right? And we take this as a target, a bit like the big bin images that Aldo has shown. And then you take a texture. So you take this, for instance. That's a choir. It's the intro of a Stevie Wonder song, which has nothing to do with the Beatles. But you can say, okay, I like this texture. I have no idea what are the notes, what is the harmony. I would like to map this texture to Michel. And you can take this.
You're a falling star. You're the getaway car.
That's a voice by Michael Bublé, the Canadian singer. You don't care about the lyrics, the notes. I like the texture, the sound, whatever. I want to map this thing onto Michel or onto La Marseillaise or whatever. So this is what you get. So you recognize Michel, you recognize everything. That's really style transfer applied to music. That's a demo, all right? So we we have made an album. Please go listen to it, and listen to it as a musical object, not as a technological demo, right? I will just give 2 examples of songs. The album has 15 songs in very many different genres. The first song is called In the House of Poetry. Was composed by Skigger with Benoît Carré, and he wanted to create a song that's inspired by jazz and sentimental, a bit nostalgic, ballads, slow ballads. So he put in the machine some songs like that, a few songs in that style. And the AI generated a very interesting melody, and then he orchestrated the melody with some audio that he took from previous recording he had made a few years before, right? And then in the end, this song was sung by a human singer called Kyrie Christmanson. So this is a very short video where you can hear a bit of the song. The sound is terrible, by the way, here. This is the B part. This is just a recording session, right? And there are lots of, it sounds like a normal melody, but there are lots of very strange stuff happening in there, harmonically, melodically, and so forth. There are videos of on the web of Kyrie talking about it. Now what I will do is I will play it again, but I will play the fully produced version, right, again, and listen to the melody and think, could this be composed by a human? Is it normal or a bit strange? And I will tell you why I played it twice after that. So why did I stop? Okay, I will not play it twice. Why did I want to play it twice? Because we discovered something with Benoît and actually all the artists, including Stromae, I will talk about, but that these songs, for some reason, they are a bit like earworms. That is, if you listen to them a couple of times, 2, 3 times, they stay in your head, they stay in there, and then you have them for a very long time. And I think this is a key characteristic of good songs, precisely. It's very, very hard to compose a melody or a song that has this property. And it turns out that the melodies we have composed, almost all of them, I would not say all of them, but almost all of them have this very strange earworm property, so that you listen to them a couple of times and then you will come back to them. I'm not doing some kind of exaggerated promotion here, but you really have to listen to them a couple of 100 times, and then you will see it will be great. All right. The last example, if I can, is a title called Hello Shadow. That was Stromae. Stromae is a big name in France and continental Europe, I would say. He came to the lab, and he wanted to do something like all the artists that we met. These guys, they don't want to do yet another song like I'm used to do. They are all obsessed by doing something new, different. Really obsessed. And so he wanted to do something different, but within, of course, the style that he liked. It turns out he likes music from Cap Verde. I don't know if say Cap Verde. So he brought in some music from there, another some sets of songs, put it in the machine, and then generated something. And then we had Keisha, who is a singer who sang the song. The song is so this is a short video of Stromae, very short with the melody.
C'est le même passage qu'entre la musique organique et la musique électronique, quoi, ou la composition électronique. Enfin, c'est une espèce de gap. C'est ouf, demain, c'est sûr, on fera tous de la musique comme ça, en fait.
So he said, c'est ouf, demain, on fera tous de la musique comme ça, which means it's crazy, tomorrow we will all make music like that. So I will do the same trick to you, I'm sorry, I will play it again. Can we have just a bit louder?
C'est le même passage qu'entre la...
Right, so the melody at the beginning is really strange. Dun, 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 dun. It goes like a ball that's bouncing like this. It's something that you would not come up with this if you were trying to let's say, build a melody on top of that kind of rhythm. And that's the final version, just a few seconds. And so forth. All right, okay, I have to stop. Sorry, I'm running out of time. So the first AI composed, that is again composed by artists with AI, and here I'm here to defend the position that AI is an incredible tool to act as a smart or possibly very smart assistant. You know, here you say every Lennon needs a McCartney, so you know you are Lennon, but if you are alone, it's a bit hard to compose. But here you have some technology that always is going to challenge you and give you ideas, and that's really what we are doing. And I think with this album we have shown that indeed you could create very interesting, novel, fresh material. You know, that's not about creating a new hit that's exactly the same as last year. It's about creating new material. And I think it's a start of a revolution that's probably comparable to what happened in the 80s with the digital sampling. You know, that was a big thing in music. And here it's just another revolution about tools for creation that we have still yet to master, to understand. But I don't, anticipating the debate, I don't think that these things can be completely autonomous. Okay, we'll stop here. I think
Sorry, François, very hard to talk about all that in 10 minutes. So can we welcome, please, Professor Simon Colton. He's Professor of Computational Creativity at Goldsmiths College, London, and at Falmouth University. Really excited about this talk. Some of you will have met him outside on his stand, I believe. Thanks, Simon.
Okay, so it is wonderful to be here. I'm very much a Francophile. I spent 5 glorious years in the 11th arrondissement in Paris, and I actually spent 10 years here at Imperial, man and boy, lecturer, senior lecturer, and reader. So it's great to be back. I'm particularly interested in this idea of imagination. I'm very pleased that this has come up tonight, because for about 20 years now, I've been looking at the notion of computational imagination. So I'm an AI researcher who has investigated the notion of creativity through philosophical discourse, through formalization, and through experiments, and through implementation of many different creative systems. And it's my kind of considered opinion that in order for your software to be taken seriously at all as being creative, it needs to exhibit some behaviors onto which you can genuinely project the following 8 words. You need your software to be skillful and have some of appreciation of what it's doing and what others have done. You need it to have some imagination to do things that no one else has done before. It needs to show intent. It needs to learn from the process and reflect on what it's done. It needs to be accountable so that we can understand why it's done something and what it's done. And finally, it needs to innovate at process level. So the question of imagination is something which has perplexed me for many years. I've looked also at intentionality. So if any of you had your portrait done outside earlier, that's really an experiment in testing whether you think the software has been intentional. And I've also tried to test the question of whether you think software has imagined things. So I'd love to know what it would mean for software to actually properly imagine something. So in the visual arts, I've been trying to get software called the Painting Fool to make stuff up, to invent scenes which don't exist in the real world, which seems like a good start towards the concept of imagination. So I used a good old-fashioned AI technique called constraint solving. Here I dragged around a few rectangles on the screen, and the software from those dragging around, the software inferred certain constraints, like the tree rectangles can't overlap each other. That if a tree rectangle is higher up the screen, then it's also thinner and shorter and less vibrant in color. And from those inferences, it generated a little program called a constraint satisfaction program. And with a bit of randomization, you can click on go, and it will generate more and more images ad nauseum like this. Can anyone see President Obama in the trees there? Yeah, okay. So this is a President series. It was the presidents as tree people. It clicks, and then you can't see anything but President Obama. So that was my first attempt. This is perhaps 12 years ago. I was looking at constraint solving. Then I started looking at genetic algorithms. So genetic algorithms are where you have bad solutions to a problem, and you cross over the material from them, like in reproduction, in natural evolution, and you mutate it a bit, and hopefully the children are a little bit better solutions than the previous ones. Do that tens of thousands of times, and you're going to get something remarkably good with any luck. So here I tried to evolve the placing of the flowers in these wreaths, but I stopped well before it got perfect, because when you get them perfect, they look too machine-generated. I want them to look a little bit handcrafted. And these pieces were on the wall at Imperial, and they may even still be there in the computing department. I haven't checked. So that's my second big attempt, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, using genetic algorithms. Thirdly, I looked at an area called context-free design grammars, and produced pieces, again, from a computational imagination, maybe. This is a piece called The Dancing Salesman Problem, which has got computational heritage there. And it was in an exhibition called No Photos Harmed. I was very keen to get across the idea that you can produce non-abstract images which are figurative or landscapes without ever starting from a photograph, which is what you do with Photoshop, for example. So these images were generated by a grammar, which is very much like a linguistic grammar, but you can use it in a generative way to generate more and more of the same. So this was in an exhibition in Paris maybe 7 years ago. Then I looked at 3D modeling. So here is a picture of a chair, but it's actually there was no photograph here. The software, the Painting Fool, took a 3D model of a chair, it arranged it in a scene, it put the lighting on and played around with that, it chose the camera position, and it took a photograph. So when you think about this, this is a virtual painting of a virtual chair by a virtual artist. So we're kind of getting, way before fake news, this was fake art in many respects. This is me 5 minutes before I sold this piece to Mrs. Yang Lang, a Chinese celebrity superstar. And if you think I look happy there, you should have seen me 5 minutes later when she handed me £500 in cold hard cash. That's a good day for an academic. So the most recent, that's probably 5 or 6 years ago. The most recent work, literally last year, was I jumped on the deep learning bandwagon. Who hasn't in AI? And there's some remarkable generative processes coming out. So deep learning is normally used for classification, but in clever ways, they can use it to generate things. And there's this software, not mine, called Pix2Pix. And I got the Painting Fool to automatically generate schematics for buildings. This is a series called The Towers of Hanoi, because they look a bit like the children's game, The Towers of Hanoi. And these buildings at the top left there don't exist. So this is not photographs. These are generated images of building facades which don't exist. And then the Painting Fool painted them up. And if you just Google for Pix2Pix, you can play around with that online. It's really great software. So in terms of generating things which don't exist, deep learning has gone further in the last few years than I had managed with the Painting Fool. And to demonstrate that, here is something remarkable. So can anyone recognize these people? And some of you understand why that question has no meaning anymore. These people don't exist. So I gave a talk just before Christmas to some school children, and I said this was my AI moment of the year. These have been generated by a neural network, a deep learned model, which generates celebrity faces. NVIDIA did this as a promotional exercise for their GPUs, and they trained it on 30,000 faces. And it's remarkable to think that that guy there doesn't actually exist. So the complexity of these things is going through the roof, really, and I'm really interested in getting my hands on these things. However, here's the thing. I wouldn't say that any of the painting full stuff or this stuff have been imagined, because I have a criteria for imagination, which is meaning. I don't think the software's imagined these faces. I think it's hallucinated them. They're a vision, they're a nightmare, or a drug-induced hallucination. And that's because the software has no meaning for them. It doesn't understand what they are. It doesn't understand anything about them, let's face it. So I went back to the drawing board 5 or 6 years ago in terms of computational imagination, and I thought, I've got to get software which can do ideation, fictional ideation. And we were lucky to get some money from the European Union, God bless the European Union, for a project called the What If Machine, the WIM project. 5 sites, 2 here in the UK, 1 in Ireland, Madrid, and in Slovenia. And I can't go into details, but the software was able to, with quite high accuracy yield, generate phrases like this, which are fictional ideas. What if there was a little cat who was afraid of milk? We tried to do Disney characterizations. What if I wanted it to tie in with the painting fool to give the painting fool ideas for paintings. So what if we painted a dolphin made out of gold? As the years progressed during this project, the software got more and more sophisticated, so it could start thinking about reasons for things happening. And so we tried Kafkaesque what-ifs. What if there was a lawyer who woke up in an alley as a dog but could still talk? You know, would you listen to a lawyer who was a dog? I'm not sure. We did narrative arcs over in Dublin. What if unattractive losers would overcome insecurity, establish cults, and become worthy saints? And this one at the bottom is now using cause and effect and consequences. So there's a lot of AI behind this, a lot of natural language processing, and a lot of machine learning and narrative generation in order to show these to the user way more likely, in a way more likely way than the worst ones. So what if there was an old dog who couldn't run anymore, which he used to do for fun, so instead he learned how to ride a horse? And you can imagine a short story or a cartoon or a little video game with these at the heart of it. And we were surprised to find loads and loads of videos of dogs riding a horse online. So that brought into question what is fictional. Is a dog riding a horse fictional? Apparently not. We did have some success with this. We got involved in a project by Wingspan Productions, a TV company here in London, to put on the world's first computer-generated musical. And it had music in there from François' system. It had narrative in there from Pablo Havas's system over in Madrid. And I pushed the whole time for our software, the What If Machine, to come up with the original concept for it. We worked with the writers, and eventually they chose this one here. What if there was a wounded soldier who had to learn how to understand a child in order to find true love? And they ran with that. They turned it into a musical set on Greenham Common during the women's peace movement, which went on for like 17 years, but wasn't really celebrated artistically. The fence, of course, is the fence between the soldiers from America and the women and their children in the peace movement. And there's a mute child, believe it or not, who gets to know one of the soldiers, and through their friendship, he falls in love with a mother. The mute child suddenly begins to sing and dance, and everything is happy, and they run off happily ever after. It is a musical after all. And we were very pleased that the What If Machine was given on the playbill the credit for the original concept. So in my last slide, I want to say that I'm here on the panel representing the very optimistic view of computational creativity, that it is absolutely possible to have fully creative software, albeit difficult to achieve. And there are some really difficult philosophical hurdles along the way. One of which is authenticity, which I'm actually studying right now. So to use François' example, imagine that his software made an amazing song, completely autonomously, without human help. And that song happened to be about being in love as a teenager. And when you listen to it, you think, wow, what a lovely song. I remember being in love as a teenager. And then you realize this has been written by an algorithm. And you think, well, hang on a minute, what the hell does an algorithm know about being in love or being a teenager? So authenticity is going to be a big stumbling block for us in computational creativity. And I think if you get software to write poems about childbirth, that kind of thing, the lack of authenticity will mean that that poem could be a fantastic poem if it was written by a person, but because it wasn't written by a person, it's not even a poem at all. I'm beginning to think that we should call poems pieces of text written by people. However, as you get more and more imaginative, you realize that it doesn't matter. Authenticity becomes less and less and less important. It doesn't matter that J.K. Rowling wasn't a genuine authority on wizards and witches. I hate to break it to you, but she wasn't actually a witch. So it doesn't matter because she wrote great books and we achieved, well, we enjoy them culturally. So I'm going to end by saying that this is my favorite what if from the What If Machine of all time. What if there was a poor boy who was born with a horn, which made him great at communicating, and he went on to become a famous slave? I love that one because it has a touch of the Gabriel Garcia Marquez magical realism about it. Born with a horn, so difficult life, but then becomes famous, but a famous slave. And I think that's the kind of output we can see from creative software in the future. And I think that, as I'll be saying on the panel, humanity can benefit an awful lot by fully autonomous creativity from our software. Okay, thank you.
So can I invite, thanks so much, Simon. Can I invite Aldo and François back up on stage? Time is flying by, so I'm going to have to ask you to keep your answers relatively short. Sorry, because we do want to open it up to the audience as well. We'll just wait for François there, but
I think you want to come here.
Come closer. Thanks a million.
I'm afraid of him.
That was brilliant, and I know it's very difficult to do that in 10 minutes, so thanks a million for giving us a little overview of the deep research you guys are doing. I just want to start by throwing it out to all three of you that, you know, we see creativity as a very sort of a fundamental feature of human intelligence. So what is the challenge for artificial intelligence when it comes to creativity?
Well, I can pick that up, I guess, which is not being human. Creativity is in many respects a celebration of human community and connection and human ingenuity. And when you start to get software which is very good at things, you start to realize that you like the things if they were written by a person, and when they're not written by a person, they kind of lose a lot of meaning, like a poem about childbirth. And I think we're going to have to change our impression of people. So it's not necessarily AI changing, it's society changing around AI in order to kind of appreciate better the creativity coming from the software and not always judge it on human terms.
I would disagree with that. So to me, creativity is something that I personally have not experienced, that strikes me as something new, is something that is beyond the level of description that I used to think about that. And so and I also believe that whether something is beautiful or not is independent of the source that created it. It's a work of art is a work of art independently of the source of the artist. And that makes art also therefore subjective, right? So if you've seen tons of, you know, automatically composed songs and listened to them, you can see that they sound hollow to you, but, you know, I very much enjoyed these artificial songs. And there was an inherent quality to them. So I think it's always, you have an interpretation and a recipient in that process.
Can I come back on that after?
Absolutely.
I would say, I mean, I want to go really downstairs. How to make a compelling song that, you know, in the 70s, 80s, or before, there were songs that would change people's life. I'm not sure that these songs are still made today. At least this is a way I see it. So if we could make a tool that people could use to make songs that you can listen and listen to again and again and again, you know, that would be, I don't know if it would be creative, but that's the goal. I mean, if AI can be used to bring back a little bit of, there is a word I like, which is not creativity, which is to be audacious, you know. Try to compose a song with larger intervals. I mean, top songs, they have only up to minor thirds or something like that, you know. It's actually very hard. But when you can do it, like some composer are able, like maybe Paul McCartney or Jobim or Michel Legrand, then it creates incredible. So I would come back a bit on the ambition of being creative. But let's try to use these techniques to do great stuff that made by humans for humans, and it would already be fantastic, actually.
You want to come back to Aldo's point? So you've raised the issue there of the intentional fallacy, or The Death of the Author, which came out of the 60s in France for Colton and Barthes and so forth. And a very nice left-wing socialist idea that we shouldn't judge a poem or a painting or a story in terms of its author, so that everyone and anyone from whatever background can write things which are appreciated. Sadly, that hasn't survived, in my impression, into the computational age when the author is software. Because you can ignore the details of a person's life, but you do know that he or she had 2 arms and 2 legs, grew up with a family, had struggles, and you can project all sorts of romantic notions onto their life if you don't know anything about them. And what we tend to do with software is project all sorts of cold, random, unintelligible processes onto them. People will often say, is your software doing this randomly? Because that's their first guess, and that's the best thing they can put in there. So that's why I get my software to always tell me why and how it's done something. In the portraits out there, it tells you what it thought about things as well as what it did. In order for me to understand that it was doing it itself, that it was the author or the painter. And my personal experience is that we can't do Turing-style tests where you put paintings on a wall. Is it by person? Is it by software? Because when you're told it's by software, it loses some of the value if it's set up in that way. If you tell people in advance that software has done this, then they can accept that from the get-go.
Do you want to come back before I go on?
Yeah, I don't want to honor that with more effort, but I think we're hitting on something very interesting here, and that's making the perfect song or making the perfect painting. And so we had a project that finished last year, which we called the Automatic Neuroscientist, and it was called automatic because basically we put people into a brain scanner and measured their brain activity in real time, and then we adjusted the images and the sounds these people were hearing. And the only thing we said is we clicked on a brain area and said, that brain area we want to make maximally active. And we used a technique, Bayesian optimization, that basically varied that space of stimuli till we had the optimum stimulation for a certain brain area. And I think the danger we can see is we can get the perfect, earworm, we can get the perfect painting, we can get the perfect ad, not because it's intelligent, but because it completely tries to exploit how our brain operates. I think that's bad artificial intelligence.
No, that's art. Art is there to... I mean, come on. I would love to have a song, for instance, I could listen to with a lot of attention that would last 1 hour. I mean, I'm ready to pay for that. So if you can, but the problem that we describe is great, it does not exist. No one has ever managed to do that.
There's a difference between artificial intelligence optimizing things and we can neuro-optimize things.
Art is about optimizing the pleasure that you want to give someone.
There's a wonderful difference between François and I, which is that...
Let's fight a bit.
I think being creative is being the first to produce something new. François looks at virtuosity and he thinks it's true creativity is being the last person to produce something in a genre because it was so good that no one ever wants to produce something like that ever more. So we're wonderfully at both ends of the spectrum that you can be very creative in the minutiae of virtuosity, and you can be completely creative in bringing into the world whole new genres of music or art.
So let me ask you this. Do you think a machine could create a life-changing song that is optimized for the brain activity? Or does it need to be something else?
I would like that. I mean, if it would exist, I would stop working. I would just listen to this radio forever. That's what I'm really looking for. But I have no idea how we could do that. You say optimize. Honestly, we have no idea. And this is a problem. We have no idea how the human ear or brain or acoustic system, whatever, works. We have no idea what we like, why we like some things and not others. We have some ideas, or you have ideas, but we have no model really that explains anything. It's like the mere exposure effect. You play a number of times a song, what happens? So you have 1/3 of the psychologists tell you the more you listen, the more people like it. Another third tell you the more you play, the less people like it. Another third say it's a U curve. Another third, yes, it's 1/3. It tells you it's like this. I mean, we don't know anything. We don't know anything. So maybe one day we know. But for the moment, I think we have no idea. It's pure speculation to me.
I'm going to go out to the audience because time is flying by and there's a few hands up. The first hand I saw was back here. I'll come back to you. There's microphones going around there, so is there somebody up the back? Will you put your hand up again? Thanks. And you might just tell us your own background as well.
Bahauddin Latif. Actually, I'm connected with this university, but I have some ideas. Perhaps I'm going to air them. I'm thinking about it, but I've not formed any real ideas about this. But you know, this thing about creativity and especially art has to have a story attached to it. So someone like Van Gogh, for example, was just a little artist. But when the story got attached to his life, it took on a life of its own, actually. So he became an artist to be valued in terms of money and so forth, and valued as an artist because somebody attached a story to his works. So it's a bit like music as well. I mean, we like American popular music. I mean, in fact, 20th century popular music is actually American popular music, because America was a very powerful capitalist country, and its values, its commodities, were able to be sold, marketed worldwide. So Chinese, for example, have a hip-hop culture. But hip-hop culture emerged in a small area in the United States. It was a sort of subculture, it was a counterculture, which was commodified by the Americans, and it took on a value of its own. So in fact, AI will only have played this amount of role, but it will need the marketeer to do its job. So actually the value attached to it comes from all the other things. So it won't, of its own volition, begin to play with our minds, if you like.
It's an interesting thought. We'll come back to it now in a minute, but I want to get a few more people in. There was another hand here.
Hi. I'm just interested, when you showcase your work, you obviously only show us a few examples. And I wonder how much filtering goes on. So you don't show us all the rubbish that gets generated. And so, you know, is some of the intelligence actually just coming from the human filtering process that you choose what to show us?
It's a great question. Great question.
I can certainly take that. So we're aware of this in computational creativity. We have something called the curation coefficient. That's something I came up with. Building on the work of Graham Ritchie, who's done a much broader study of this. We reckon its progress, and we calculate it. We will say the first round of this software, only 10% of the images would I show to my friends and family or colleagues. And then if next time the software is improved to 20% and 30% and 40%, that's exactly what we do. So we call it curation because most of the time you don't actually post-process images or music with like Photoshop, you just throw them away, which is what lots of artists did as well, just for the record. Francis Bacon was famous for throwing away dozens of his paintings. We're not hiding the fact, and what we try and do is, like I showed you those ones from the What If machine, the biggest, hardest part of that problem, that project, was getting it to give us those good ones before it gave us all of the crap. And so we wrote software which could tell stories about them. We used machine learning from feedback from crowdsourcing. So the 4 or 5th of the project was put into solving this problem of just having an awful load of rubbish from which you can cherry pick. And we are aware of this.
And from the music point of view, François?
Yeah, there is some curation. It depends on some songs were created almost right away. Some of them took more curation, but I mean, I would say it's a detail because anyway, human can only filter about like 10 or 20, not millions, you know. So the key point, as Simon said, is to have a generator that generates only good things. But the problem is that to make the difference between something very good, which is not enough, and something compelling, that difference, yes, the machine is not able to do, and I guess you need a human because you need also to have an ear about to know how the society is going to receive and all that. But so there is a little bit, but it's not that much.
So will AI always be a creative partner rather than a replacement?
That's what I think, yes.
Yeah.
I think there's reason to believe it can be autonomously creatively.
You're of that school.
Yeah, it is. The penning fall already is to a large extent. Whether it is producing good art or is being hugely creative, I don't think it is. I'd rather it was at the stage of a 5-year-old artist, but is actually creating in a creative way.
So we talked a lot about artistic creativity, but if you think about creativity in other domains, scientific creativity, coming up with beautiful new theories in mathematics or physics. It's not clear to me to what, once you start talking about these formal domains, to what level creativity is not actually some form of meaningful random search, and you're basically structuring how you're searching for the right things. And so without wanting to go into definitions of creativity, but I think there's this element here that certain people have a talent to shape in which direction they're searching for new things. If you speak, to many of the digital composers, they will even start with random music strings and then try to enhance them. And whether this is basically what you're providing are not just tools for, without diminishing them, but just to shape the way we're doing random exploration.
Do you want to come back briefly? I just want to get to one last question.
Just to say that there's a spectrum of how much we expect humanity in the creative process. Pure mathematics was my entry into this field. No one cares whether it was by software or by a person, who that person was. As long as the maths is interesting and beautiful, that's fine. All the other way down to the end of poetry, when if Donald Trump wrote that poem about childbirth, it would be derided. Yet if someone else wrote it, it would be different. We expect different levels of humanity. That wasn't answering your question, I should point out. And on the science side, there's objective measures of value, like improved life expectancy, if it's in medicine, that kind of thing. In the arts, we make the rules, and I've had a hard time getting this across to people. The objective rules of value in art changes from day to day because it's culturally defined by a community called the art world, which is, has problems with that phrase.
I want to bring in this question here as well.
Thank you, good evening. As a bit of context, I originally trained as a musician and found that there was no money in it, so I now work in computing. My point really is part observation, part question. So the way you were using the deep learning to look at how the brushstrokes of Monet could potentially be extrapolated, or the counterpoint by analysing Bach would be extrapolated. What you don't seem to be captured is what the idea and emotion the original artist was trying to convey. So for me, each artist is trying to convey a feeling or an idea through their particular medium, whether it's painting or music. If you can't contextualize how those particular brushstrokes meant that particular feeling, you're just generating noise.
Yeah, so I think this is a very interesting point, and this goes back to the narrative about the artist, or the narrative that we're embedding things in. I think it was the Frieze 2014, where a German artist whose name is currently escaping me presented a motorboat. And you could buy that motorboat at the Frieze Art Fair for the price of the motorboat, or he can provide you with an essay explaining why this is a modern piece of art crafted by him for twice the price. And he sold it at twice the price, but the buyer could have also bought just the motorboat from him as well. So I think embedding something with a narrative, because it puts you into a context and puts it into the intellectual views of the art world, it sort of appeals, it's styled in the right way, is actually something that an AI could create. I could have an AI create an optimal biography for which this artwork would optimally resonate with you. Yeah, so I think this whole narrative biography thing, because at some point you may have an anonymous artist, you don't know who it is, think about Banksy. Maybe Banksy is an AI, right? So if you don't know that, but you have certain associations with them, I can create them. And so really this, who you really are as an artist, I don't find so important anymore. And,
sorry, it's not who you are, it's the idea.
Or the ideas that you had. I can write you the perfect narrative that would resonate optimally with you if I download your social media profile, know who your friends are, and what you like. And an AI could generate that perfect piece of art.
You are a bit reductionist, I think.
Of course I am.
We are more complex than our Facebook profiles.
How would it know what the idea is if you can't extrapolate how an idea is transformed by an artist? If you're looking at a pattern, how do you say you can create... Sorry. If you cannot extrapolate what the original pattern was, so you have an idea which is translated through a particular medium, whether it's music or it's through painting, then you might be able to create a unique idea, but unless you know how to match that with the output, then again, it won't necessarily have the same depth.
I just wanted to agree with you on aspects of the Monet style, which is, I'm really not in favour of pastiche, especially in the visual arts. And I think you can do ideation, but what we're getting from style transfer and pastiche generation coming from the deep learning community, which is happening a lot, is what I would call creation without creativity. You can create things of beauty, and they are, but no one's ever going to project the word creativity onto the software which produced them. And a great example of this is a 10-line algorithm for producing a fractal image. It's incredibly simple to do, the output is beautiful, and yet you're never going to say that 10-line algorithm was creative. And this is all good, there are commercial reasons to want this in our lives, but it's not necessarily pushing forward the idea that software itself could be creative, which is why I avoid it, and it shows a bit of naivety. So when computer scientists say, well, it looks like a Monet, so it must be as important as a Monet, the artists go like this, and I cringe as a scientist, because that's the kind of view I had 15 years ago, and tried to get rid of over the years.
Okay, there's a load of hands up, but I think we've only time for one more, and you were next. So if we can just get a microphone to hear, please.
So thank you for your great talks tonight, and since you show a lot of great works that you did on generative new artists from your work. So I think some of you show neural style transfer learning, and I assume probably you did some general adversarial network to synthesize those images. But my question is deep learning is very promising in memorization, but do you think it actually understands what it is doing? And my second follow-up question to the first one is actually there's a lot of debate in deep learning and AI community on the interpretability of neural network, and it was a great debate in NIPS last year. So do you think we need to understand what neural network is doing? And do you think it's valuable for us, for artists to understand what neural network is actually thinking about? Thank you.
I'd like you all to say something on this because it's our last question. Off you go, Aldo.
So as a declared reductionist, of course that's the most frustrating thing about deep learning is that we don't understand why it works. I mean, I can give you a good explanation, but we don't understand why it learns, what it learns, and what structures it creates. And in fact, it's devoid of the classic, Galilean view of trying to understand the world from bottom-up models. It just does it. It solves a problem. There's no understanding. You can have machine translation models based on deep learning that have no understanding of language or concepts of words. But what you find is that you're identifying elements in these networks that encode cats or the word house that sort of emerges out of the data, but there's no interpretability. And so now the question comes, of course, how much of the brain of an artist do you need to understand to appreciate that artist? And probably you don't need to see the brain scans or recordings from that person's brain. So the challenge for us is that we cannot really interpret these systems, and that makes it very dangerous for us to apply them in the technical world, in the healthcare world, because unexpected things can happen. Of course, we want to understand why things happen. It's not clear to me that we really want to understand why an artist is doing what it's doing. I think that's something for the art history degrees and colleagues to work on the next 50 years.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't agree. Actually, I like there was the first question or comment about how building a narrative around a work of art. There was a book printed in an American book, which I love. The title was What to Listen For in Mozart. I thought this book was fantastic. It sounds a bit stupid, but if you read the book, you listen to Mozart in a completely different way. You know where to look at, what to listen to. You may not agree or not that whether Mozart is interesting, but it changes completely the way you listen to music. But then, personally, I don't think we have any idea how to build intentionality, sense of direction, emotion. I think we are very far from that, but I'm very convinced that we are very close to building systems which are able to explain or to formulate in words what's going on in a deep network, for instance, using introspection. That I think is very, very, we are very close to that. And I think the next step for music, at least, is to generate a text or a story that says why this thing is interesting. Where are the bits that are really interesting and novel and fresh? And I think we are not far from that.
Last word, Simon?
Sure, so my answer is yes, no, and maybe.
Don't take risks.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, in the arts, I disagree with Aldo. I think if software can't explain what it's done, and I don't think it's about us, I think the software needs to explain to us what it's done. I don't think it's going to be taken seriously as being creative, and I think there'll be a sad omission from our lives. We really should have creative software out there, and we're not going to take it seriously unless it can explain itself. No, outside of the arts, if you think about self-driving cars, they're going to have crashes, for sure, and we're not going to fully know why they've had those crashes. They'll rely on lots of deep learning models, and the actual answer will be, well, it took sensor data from 50 different laser and sonar sensors, and it passed them through these neural networks, and that changed the gear, and it won't actually give us real explanations. But car deaths are likely to fall by a factor of 10. So we'll take that, thank you very much. And we won't care that lawyers will have a hard time working out who was at fault in an accident. However, that's where I come in with a maybe, because I think what we're going to find, and François were talking about this, and I were talking about this just today, I think we're going to have secondary AI systems which are used to come up with plausible explanations for why something happened, like a car crash. And they're not going to be perfectly accurate, because a real accurate answer involves lots of mathematics and neurons firing. But they're going to come with, like Tesla did. Tesla came up with a human language explanation of why that guy died in their car, which was a white truck against a white background cutting across them. But the actual explanation is far more complicated than that. But as humans, we make up explanations for things which are less than accurate, let's say. And I think secondary AI systems will maybe help us to understand how AI in our lives have actually altered things.
Okay, we're going to end it there. Like all the best conversations, they leave you wanting more. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but I want to say thanks a million to our three amazing panelists, Aldo, François, and Simon.
Thank you so much. I mean, I come out of this with a huge sense of optimism of the future. I think one thing that we can be sure of is that artificial intelligence will never manage to have the level of disagreement that French and British academics and scientists will have on a panel debate. So there's hope for us yet. There's jobs to the future. Just very quickly, the Night of Ideas continues, and we've got a fantastic set of events still to come. Starting in 4 minutes' time at the Institut Français in the library, we have contemporary music as a creative medium. At 9:15 in the cinema, we have 100 years of women's rights. At 10:15, we have free champagne testing by our partner Pommery. And finally, the last panel of the night at 10:45 is Power and Politics, the hottest genre in TV drama. Thank you for coming. A final big raising the roof round of applause for Simon, François, Aldo, and our chair, Anne. Thank you.